May 20th, Douglas Board of County Commissioners business meeting. We have a relatively short agenda this evening, but we want to welcome everybody who's here tonight. And I need to go through a few reminders about how we run our meetings during this time of social distancing. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share the screen with the call. Participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet. All into the meeting with their audio muted. The commission and the public will not be able to hear. Presenters will be unmuted when their agenda item comes up. We ask that all online presenters use good conference call etiquette and mute their line when not speaking and introduce themselves each time they speak. If you have a public comment on the agenda item or under public comment, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask that speakers give their names and address for the minute. The county reserves the right to shut off the microphone or remove any speaker from the meeting if they're vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The chat function has been disabled, and a recording of the meeting will be available on our website after each meeting. All right. Item we have is our consent agenda. We only have one item on our consent agenda. Any commissioner want to remove a consent agenda item for further discussion?
I do not.
Seeing none, is there any member of the public who would like to remove a consent agenda item for public comment? No. Jill, Sarah?
No, I don't have anyone here.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And so for those of you who are listening, we check with Sarah is at the courthouse, giving any member to come into the courthouse for public comment or to listen or watch our meetings. They can come there. And then Jill Joliker, our assistant county manager administrator, is online looking for those who are on the Zoom call. On that work, duties as assigned. All right, so do I have a motion for our one consent agenda item?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. Thank you for being here and for all your work since we have you here with our emergency management team. That's been a ton of work, and we really appreciate you and your entire team during all this.
Thank you.
On to our regular agenda item, which is a provision of supplemental funding for Just Food of Kansas to support community feeding needs. And I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, commissioners. Jill Joliker is here as well, and Brooke Sauer, if you have questions specifically about some of the funding strategies we're trying to explore here for Just Food. Early on in our Unified Command in our Housing and Human Services branch, it was quickly identified that the dramatic increase in output that Just Food has been putting out since March was going to take a dramatic toll on their budget. Just Food is receives some county, is a county partner agency, partner, and we had some conversations at UC structure as well as the city of Lawrence, and really trying to talk about how we respond to this incident. Worked with Liz Keever, the Chief Executive Officer, about what her needs were over the last. And I would say, we have really struggled to identify great state and federal funding sources for this project in need. It's just not been as easy as you might think. That community feeding would be a higher priority in this situation. With dramatic increases in unemployment, it is natural and to be expected that we are going to have more folks in need of food resources in our community. And so we, in Unified Command in the city and county, had conversations about, and just like we've had conversations about other projects like the hotel project from a week or so ago, this need to sort of have some sort of funding to proceed with in some basis. We set up a structure like that with the hotel situation, like what the city and the county were comfortable financing. If federal funding is able to be identified, or state funding, which we don't see right now in that project, then we could use it to offset our costs in that area. With Just Food, at the very last minute, we did source that we have both the city and the county have applied for to receive funding for some community feeding that might offset our need, and we outline that in the AIR report, that would offset our need to cover 50% of this ask wholly. But at this point, like, and Brooke, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think our grant application is for $58,000. And the ask is for both the city and the county to backstop a need of 100,000 in total, or 100,000 each. So 1,000 in total for both the city and the county. Brooke, did I get those numbers right?
Yeah, so for this particular grant, or the funding sources for this operation, I'm pursuing 3 separate sources. One of them is $58,000 through the Bureau of Assistance, and then the second would be the Governor's Office Grant Program. I'm asking $12,500 from that funding. I'm going to pursue the rest through fee. So that's what I'm looking at so far.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Brooke. I guess I want to be really clear here. The BJA, the Bureau of Justice Affairs grant, is the one that's first coming up that we've already put in. I think we're really hopeful that we'll get some funding there. Obviously, with FEMA reimbursement, as I've mentioned to the commission a number of times, we're now coming up on a 1-year anniversary of the ESF 4 tornado in Douglas County, and we've not gotten reimbursed from those. So applying for FEMA reimbursement is really our last stop, our last hope of what we think to receive. And there are even some very they're going to want to make us jump through related to feeding in this case for FEMA reimbursement. So I think there's a very good chance that if I'm really hopeful about the BJA grant, but I do think that there's a distinct possibility that this cost will fall to both the city and the county for at least a significant time to come.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Brooke. Questions for Sarah, Brooke, or Jill?
So I think I understand what this is meant to be. I just want to clarify, this is to be used as needed, kind of. It's not a lump sum given now. I mean, are we filling holes, or are we paying for future costs? Or
what we would do here is develop an amendment to our community partner agreement that would outline how we would distribute the funds. I want to be really careful to be more specific on that until I want to make sure that we develop that amendment in a way that it will allow us to receive any reimbursement, if at all possible, from other sources. So that means that in terms of what we ask them to, in essence, invoice us for, in accordance with that agreement, we're going to have to be really specific on, so that we have the detail that Brooke needs to meet any sort of grant request, which really is going to be, I mean, obviously I'm being a bit obtuse, but what I'm talking about is separating food from like overtime, staff expenses. The BJA really only wants to pay for food. So we're going to have some details in terms of invoices as to what Liz can give us to qualify for conversations on this, and I believe that we can get what we need to do that. But frankly, Just Food's already in the hole from what they've been putting out to the community. So I would anticipate they would invoice us pretty quickly,
okay.
and particularly because the BAA grant will come to the county. So it's not, you know, sometimes you can find a funding source that maybe just food could apply for. That's not what we think we've got going here. This would be an ask. The BJA grant would come to us. And Brooke, if I'm right, like potentially with the FEMA, they could Just Food could perhaps submit for FEMA with, am I correct in that?
Oh, sorry, I keep muting and unmuting myself. So food cannot be a applicant. It does have to go through the City of Lawrence or Douglas County, and we're going to try and pursue that through both entities. So the City of Lawrence is going to have their own request for public assistance, which may include some of this food distribution, and the Douglas County would have their own separate request for food distribution. So,
Thanks for clarifying.
but they cannot do it. Yeah, they can't do it themselves.
We sort of have a precedent for this. I mean, I think on this exact same timetable, we community shelter coming to us asking for some supplemental funds. So this really doesn't seem, it's not great. I mean, considering the crisis we're under, I'm sort of surprised we haven't had more of this. And the question to you, Sarah, is, you know, we don't have a huge reserve of funds that we could use for things like this. Are you seeing anything else in the groups that you're working with that more of these requests will be on the horizon? That may be too much to ask. I don't really know, but I'm going to ask it.
Well, never say never.
Right.
And I do think that there are a few other pretty dramatic immediate community needs that we see happening right now in the community for a variety of factors, some related to COVID-19 and some not, but important that we can make sure that things continue to happen. So I don't want to say that I think this is the last one. I think it is, my hope is towards the end. And you're right, like we did have this last year. Problem is, I had a better handle on revenues last year than I do this year for the 21 budget and for the rest of 2020. You know, we don't have a good sense of where revenues are going to come in. Sales tax numbers were made available for March until month. So we're, you know, anticipating those numbers and putting those pieces together as we begin work on the 2021 budget process and the 2020 budget reestimate. And it does make me nervous. Our general fund was only 4%. Which is a big increase for us. I'm very proud of how we've been able to build that the years, but it is to many of our peers. That being said, you know, we have significant amounts of cash in capital and equipment reserve. So the financial standpoint of the county is very secure. We have a very high bond rating. You know, I don't mean I don't want to make it sound like we aren't financially stable, but we've earmarked our cash reserves, those total of funds for specific projects. So I want us to be cautious before we dip any real deeply into our general fund reserves. And it may mean we have to reallocate some things, have some more flexibility in our budget. But, you know, right now I think kind of this could be a couple $100,000 hit, $1,000 total hit on our reserves on the number of projects that come in. And then, you know, our hope is that we would have some federal resources to reimburse that, but it's, you don't know it till you get it. The BJA grant is, we have an allocation amount we can apply for, but Brooke, remind me, is it a competitive process?
Sarah, that particular grant is a formula grant, so that $58,008, that would be just a direct allocation.
That's what I thought.
Um,
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say the Lawrence Community Shelter, they are eligible for public assistance through FEMA. So that is something that's a little bit different from this particular situation with Just Food, where they kind of to a donut hole receive that assistance because of the type of business that they do and the food that they get from the state. So it's just kind of a different situation with them specifically, that they're not eligible for that funding and the community shelter is. So
Yeah, and we've had that conversation on a couple of CARES funding that came for community feeding. That was sent to the 3 largest food banks in Kansas, and those work in partnership with Just Food, so they will receive some commodity allocations from them, but they won't. It doesn't offset the cost that they've already spent, and provide health, fresh food to the community, and many of these will come down as canned food commodities, for lack of a better term.
Sarah, just one more question. Brooke, I appreciate you sharing that about the shelter and their eligibility for some of the CARES Act funding. That's helpful. But last year when we talked about a supplemental request from the community shelter, we had all kinds of questions about leadership and fundraising, and you know, my awareness of Just Food and the work that is, we don't have any of those same concerns in this case. I think Elizabeth has provided fantastic leadership, and our work with the community shelter has really seen a turnaround in the leaderability, and so I don't think we need to put, it's not a concern that Just Food isn't doing good work or doesn't have donors and isn't applying for other things. This is just trying to help where there really is a huge need that we're seeing across the community based on a global pandemic and massive unemployment rate, and doing what we can in the community to help address that need where we're just not seeing federal support there for it. Would that be accurate? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And you're absolutely right on target as to where we are here. It is a really unique situation. This donut hole, as Brooke put it, is absolutely right, where Just Food is just not fitting in certain boxes in a way that we're able to leverage those funds. Part of our agenda packet last week when we had the conversation about the hotel program was there was what the city and county are proposing for CDBG and ESG funds, and those funds from the state and feds have been really helpful in leveraging rapid rehousing, utility assistance, rent assistance, tremendously helpful. We'll put a ton of resources into this community to help with specific needs, and we're very hopeful that we can capital funds from CDBG to make some, sustainable improvements to the shelter that will just help them in any sort of resurgence of an epidemiological event, but also just for the future. So I don't want to sound so horrible there, that we have been able to leverage really helpful for our community. It just appears that there's some weird holes in terms of like hotels, feeding, where we're not really having good matches.
Thanks.
So I kind of reiterate what Patrick said, and I served on the Just Food board up to a couple of years ago, and so have watched them grow and kind of mature in leadership and board and their fundraising. It just happens that they don't have their fundraising events this year, which are enormously important to them. And I would also say I think their extra costs aren't just food. I have learned from our own farm enterprise, how expensive it is to box food. They are, because they are just boxing food for 2 week supplies and putting them in a kind of a no-touch delivery to people's cars. And so the purchase of the boxes, the purchase of the protective equipment, and all the extras that come with the disaster. It's not just the cost of food or staff. They're relying heavily on volunteers and who are doing that work at pretty high risk. It's a pretty high touch, and so I really support this, and I if ever there was an agency in our community that dives in and does the work without complaint, hesitation, and accountable for every penny, they are really sharp. I don't think they would ask for this if they didn't really, really need it. And I think I had only 2 conversations about this with citizens. One didn't want us to give a dime because he sees some of that food being thrown away from apartments that he owns. But the other citizen felt like this was a good way for every citizen in Douglas County to help folks who are hungry. So I would acknowledge the first person's concern. You don't want to waste food. But I think the second person expresses this to Douglas County folks, where we do want to help each other. And this is Douglas County money. I think this is a good way for us to have everybody come to Just Food's aid right now.
Yes, I agree. I think I appreciate how much Just stepped up, and so many of our human service agencies have stepped up during this time. I mean, that has to be a little scary to ramp up and put some of your volunteers at risk, and just really appreciate Elizabeth's leadership and then work on finding those gaps. Where are those places that we can find state and federal funding, and then bringing to us those spots where we're not able to do that. And so I'm very supportive of this. And I did also hear from a few of the public, and I think we all have to work together to help each other now. And this is how we do it. Our team at the county is working really hard to find other funding if we can, so we don't jeopardize other projects. But we've got to feed our people for sure. That's a definite need.
Yeah, I did what from one person, and they were very supportive of it. And I think the thing we have to remember is that, they are touching a huge number of lives and families and children. They're making a big impact, and it's not like it's 40 people that they're feeding. They have really stepped up and are filling a huge need in our community at this time, and I think we need to do the same for them.
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion to authorize county administrator to spend up $100,000 for support Just Food of Douglas County for COVID-19 community response.
Second.
I'll let we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Passes 3-0. That's the end of our regular agenda item. I think Commissioner Thellman has an appointment for us.
I do. If you all had the opportunity to see a resume that was submitted, this request just came in today, but it's a little bit time sensitive. Jan Schubert Eric with our Heritage Conservation Council says that Kathy Duigans, who's been a fantastic board member, is not going to be reappointed. She's not able to this for a second term, and so they have found Roger Boyd, who represents Southwest Douglas County and has a vast knowledge of all things natural and historic, and would be a real asset to the Heritage Council's work. So if you are with my making that motion, I'd like to do that. Otherwise, if you need time to read his resume next week, we can do it next week.
I'm ready.
Roger is
Okay.
one who certainly understands conflicting values sometimes with his work with the wetlands, and I think really can add some leadership to the HCC. So I think he's a great
Yeah.
addition to that team. He'll be great.
Yeah. Well, losing Kathy is a tremendous loss. She's a fantastic member, but gaining Roger, it's
Great.
it's good. So move that we appoint Roger Boyd to the council.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes
Thank you.
3-0. On to general public comment. If you are late joining, we'll check in first with Sarah at the courthouse, see if anybody has come to the building for public comment.
They have not.
Okay, then we'll check with Jill Joliker online.
Nope, I don't see anybody.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Appreciate that. Seeing public comment, we'll move to Commissioner and Administrator Miscellaneous. And we'll start with Sarah.
Thanks, commissioners. You were sent a copy of my weekly memo directly. Robin is out this week, and so I was not able to get it to the agenda before this meeting, but we will get it added to the packet later this week. What we included in the memo, there was a specific update on a legislative update as we approach sine die session. We got a legislative update from Stuart Little, and there's a number some tax legislation pieces that are coming out that may have an impact on the county, so I'd encourage you to take a look at that. The only other thing I wanted to add tonight was, and I've gotten permission from our county clerk, Jamie Shue, to share the good news with the county that Douglas County, the election office, the election team at the county clerk's office under Jamie Shue's leadership has received an allocation of at least $115,000 from CARES Act funding through the Kansas Secretary of State's office to assist with voting this year related to COVID-19 needed. So Jamie's working on his plan, and when he kind of has an outline of that plan, I've encouraged him to come share it with the commission as we begin to think about the number of elections that we have yet this year. But it's exciting to know that those federal funds will be coming to us very quickly, hopefully. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm now off mute and ready to talk again. Sorry about that. Any commissioner items? No, seeing none. All right, super. If we have none, we will move to adjourn.
Okay. Take care.
All right, and we are adjourned.